Okay, sorry about that, guys. I think now you can hear my mic and you can see my face. Now, let us do this once again. And this is the reason why I don't like to do in live streams so much, because you get these problems you cannot sort them. Anyhow, we're going back now. We're gonna check out this track once again. And as I was talking about before, the track itself, the idea behind this track was to take one melody and use it as much as possible and see how much I could, what I could do to not make it boring. So that's the whole idea behind the track. So as I told you, it starts with this piano patch, which is 3. One is the giant, one is lap Spitfire piano, and there's another giant. Basically, it's we have, it's written for 2 fingers. The blue notes are playing the melody, and the green notes are playing the chords. So it's the left finger, and this is the right finger. And as you see, the melody ends differently. So one thing I did wrong in this, this was a Star Wars cover, okay? And I did the fourth theme. That was the melody on which this was based, and there was a note in the melody which I got wrong all the time for some reason. Because I wrote this by memory entirely. I didn't even listen to the fourth theme ever since I don't know how many years, and I tried to write it by memory. So I got one note wrong, but here you're also gonna notice it ends differently than the normal. So it's that's not how it ends normally in the original. And I decided to do this as a way to carry the track forwards, because one way in which you can carry a melody forwards or a track forwards is by actually not, and I'm gonna deactivate all the units here to save a bit of RAM, but one thing you can do is to actually not rely too much on, or rather not end your melody. You can just do a variation at the end, so it doesn't really conclude normally. If I did da 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 and then repeated the same thing, it would have been boring. So that's why I did this variation. And you're going to notice this sort of variations in the whole track. Now, after that, we have, and let me see what it wasn't. We have this. So that is pretty much what I added here was I added a cello that does that main melody again, and then the piano. I'm going to use the stems. The piano, we have another voice here. So that bum, 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 and then you also have the melody being playing on a higher octave. So that was to add some variation to the melody and not do the same thing over and over again. So I just increased 1 octave, and then I have the melody playing on cello. This is Tina Guo solo cello, playing legatos. Now what happens in the track that after this repetition, we have a few things happening again. First, the solo cello ends on a, I think, different. Yeah, it doesn't end da 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 da, but it does this variation. Which is not how the melody normally ends. So again, I try to bring this forwards, but not delivering that final statement of the melody that we all know. And then below that, there's all the many things happening. So let's check out in MIDI what is happening. And it's not gonna sound as loud because my mastering is deactivated again. Maybe I can add some Maximus to actually compensate for that. And that's what I'm gonna do. But basically, here comes the intro is pretty minimal, but then I wanted to add all other stuff. So one thing you can do to make your orchestrations sound amazing is to, bit by bit, add more things as you go, okay? So that's what I did here. And basically in this bit, you have the melody on the pianos being played on a higher octave, but you also have this. These harps are from Cine Harps, and this, by the way, can you guys still see me? I don't see any comments in the chat, so I'm maybe the stream is dead, and I don't really realize, so let me know if I'm alive. But anyway, this is something the harps are playing, and this is, I wouldn't call this a melody, because if you just take these notes and you do this, and you paste them like that, you pretty much have chords. So these are, you can consider them arpeggi. I'm pretty much playing, the chords by arpeggiating them with, different rhythm and stuff like that. And it's actually pretty simple rhythm, it's nothing too crazy, but even here in this, chord stuff, arpeggi, I'm not doing, but you do. I have a few changes, so this is adding detail to every single instrument, and then the way it ends, makes you want more, kind of. You're like, okay, something like you feel the transition coming. So I had that on the harps. The celesta is doing the same thing, I think. After the center beat, it does a similar melody, chords or whatever to the harps. Below that, we also have these strings ensembles. Okay, so there's a few things happening. First, we have a string ensemble, which is pretty much playing chords. My computer is lagging like hell. And basically you see like some chords have independent, like some voicings of the chords that have independent movements in them. And that's what you want to have in your string ensembles. You're going to see that throughout the track. Like for example, in this bit, there's another example of that. Like here. Oh my God, I cannot use this MIDI. But yeah, you see like some voices move independently, and you have this like da 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 da. So like when you're writing your string ensembles, try to have these independent voice movements. They like ideally they need still to play like interesting harmonies and chords. You cannot just write 2 voices and 4 voices that don't make sense together. But each voice should be independent. So sometimes they're playing together, sometimes one voice is moving and the other is staying still. Like for example, here this moves, this stays still. Another thing that helps is using dynamics. And people often ask me, hey, what is the right way to do this? And there's no right way to do this. Like when you sing, da, 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 the way I sang that with rising and falling dynamics is entirely instinctive, I cannot tell you, oh yeah, you need to like draw these curves this way and do this and this. No, that's not how it works. It's just something instinctive. And the more orchestral music you listen to, and like organic orchestral music, like concertos and stuff like that, the more you notice how humans usually play when they're a group of strings playing in terms of dynamics. And you can emulate that. So if you struggle with like drawing these things, which this is a MIDI curve from CC1, you can just listen to a lot of orchestral music. And that was going to help. Now, below that, in the intro of the strings, we have nothing on bass. The violas are doing tremolos. And the violins, I don't remember even. Okay, so I'm playing sort of like, again, independent voice movements with the chords on violas and first violins. So on one side, the string ensemble are bringing up like the thickness of the strings chords, and on the other side, the first violins and violas are bringing other voices to our string chords here, but they also have this tremolo, which brings movement to it. So that's what's happening in this bit with the strings. And yeah, this stream will stay online after we're done. Then below that, we also have this. Oh my God. Let me show you with the stems. Below that, we have the choir. Pretty simple stuff. And they just, bring, I don't know, accents to our chords, They're just contributing to the strings in some parts. Below that, again, like this is just the background, okay? The protagonists here are the cello playing the main melody, then the solo vocals, and the solo violin. Now, the choir I showed you, part was from Oceania. The other part was from Stormchoir 2, I think, for the legatos. And then, other than that, we have this sort of counterpoint going on. So that solo violin is just a counter melody kind of to the cello, and I added it there because that was original, by the way. I added it there because as the cello did that variation, I just wanted to introduce something more like, so this is something I do all the time. Like every repetition, I try to add something new. So da 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 da, and then it does this. And then I added the solo vocals below that just to embellish this and to feel the frequency spectrum. And I just loved it, how it sounded. I just wanted it to sound a bit more emotional and stuff like that. So that's what's happening. And then here, so basically you have an upheaval because you have the strings doing da 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 da, and then you have the solo violins and solo cello ending on a high note, as well as the solo vocals, which are from Jaeger. Like, na, na. You feel, okay, this is intense, and everything just... And before that ends even, we already have the main choir, which are now coming in, and they drag you into the next part, where they are the leading elements for the melody. So in this part, I tried to go for a sort of God of War vibe, and the God of War soundtrack, I referred to the one that got released on PlayStation 4 earlier last year. And that soundtrack has a lot of main choir going, and it feels like whenever I listen to the God of War soundtrack, which was by Bear McCreary, I grow my beard by my beard grows by 20 centimeters every time. It's like manly as hell, and it's partly because of the main choir, which take over that main track so much, the main theme so much, and that also happened in the Skyrim main theme. And basically, I try to replicate the same thing here. And I use Oceania on choir. This is a library from Performance Sample. And this track itself, I actually wrote it partly to challenge myself to write the same melody and just challenge myself that way, but also to try a few libraries from Performance Samples. One being Caspian, which you're going to see later. The other is Solos of the Sea, which is a solo violin library. It's the same you heard before on solo violin. And Oceania is another library from Performance Samples. And basically they do these orchestral libraries on Contact, which have a very basic graphical user interface, and they don't have different articulations because they adapt to how you write. So if I write long notes, it's going to give me nice marcatos. But if I write short notes, it's going to give me nice staccatos. And you see that here in the main choir, probably. Now, this choir was one of the most interesting parts for me to write because it has this sort of, so we had the main one. Now it sounds different because here I'm doing, first it's on the choir, second it's like marcatos alternating themselves with staccatos, which is a very much different way to play this compared to the cello only playing it in legato or the piano playing it, with piano sort of vibes. So here I'm again twisting the melody by moving it to a different instrument, changing the articulations in which it's played, and below that main melody being played by the main choir in Oceania, I also have another patch of Oceania doing this counter melody. So that's the counter melody. And then the cool thing is that in the second half, the counter melody takes over, and it does this. Which I'm not sure if you heard it very well, but you're gonna notice it, especially in the brass later. It's like da 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 da, and it doesn't really go into conflict with the main melody because it's playing pretty much same rhythm, kind of, in the first half. And in the second half, I actually wanted it to take over a bit, so I tweaked the rhythm a little bit more. And then I don't remember what women choir are doing here. Just chords like this and marcatos. These are from Metropolis arc. And then on the second half, they're doing the same counter melody that we saw before. And now the brass is actually accompanying a lot of the choir here, and when taken alone, the brass sounds like, where is it? So the brass sounds like, we have bass trombone and French horn in this bit, mostly bass trombone. Just doing marcato notes and staccatos. And then So that sort of low brass, when you layer it with the choir, it just sounds amazing. That's a good layering to do. And that I have that on French horn, and I also have that on, I think, bass trombone. Now half of the bass trombone is half of the brass is Metropolis Arc 1, and the other half is Caspian. And Caspian, when taken alone, it sounds like this. This is just the Caspian bass trombone. And again, it changes depending on how you write. So if you write short notes, it's just staccatos, but long, it's like sustain or marcato. And, you know, it's just so good. And then in the second half of this part, again, I introduced that counter melody and like da 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 that thing there. But what I do is I introduce it with these two notes. You know, so so it's like whenever you want to introduce something, it's a good idea. Like I did here, I wanted to introduce the main melody on Man in the second part, like in this part of the structure. And before this part kicked in, the choir, the main choir already started, you know, just to drag you in. Just like here, the counter melody drags you in by doing the ba ba, like. My God, this sounds so bad with Maximus. Anyway, that's what's happening with the brass. Then below that, we finally have some percussion, which sounds like this. These are mostly timpani and tubular bells and cymbals. So what I did is I wanted the percussion to be more minimal. I wanted it to be more minimal because, again, I was trying to go for the God of War vibe, and the God of War theme, the percussion is not so invasive, just like it is in my tracks usually. So this time I was like, okay, I'm going to go for something big and manly. So I went for timpani, which sound big and huge and amazing, especially when you do rolls with them and stuff like that. This is Rhapsody Orchestral Percussion. Then below that, we also have cymbals. And I'm going to show you the impact of like removing the cymbals from the track. Again, I cannot use the MIDI because my computer is like weak. It's very weak. But okay, so this is the part, right? Now, if I take the cymbal stems and I remove it completely, it's going to sound like this. And it's not as big as it was. You know, so it's like adding the cymbals really helps, and I just use those on the parts of the melody that I really wanted to send out. So the intro. Same for the timpani, really. And then I also have this taiko roll that leads to the, you know, this part. So it's like the choir and the taiko roll bring us in, kind of. And then I think I have some marcatos on the strings going on, probably. Yeah. So these cellos, Metropolis Arc 1, and the basses, still Metropolis Arc 1. This one is sustained though, because I wanted it to be less aggressive. This one is marcato. And these ones are marcatos from cinematic strings too, alternating between staccatos, and they are just doing the same rhythms as the brass. Sort of a different though timbre, so they don't really clash. By the way, I see lots of questions popping in, and yeah, let me just address a few of these questions. But after we're done with the analysis, what we're gonna do a fast Q&A. But yeah, like let me read a few questions. Do you have a suggestion for external mod wheel or thingy which you can use for MIDI controls like Expression? I'd never used one, so no. You can buy one, but I don't know which one to recommend you. Your harp and celesta sounded really full, like filled a big part of the frequency spectrum. How did it not clutter the mix? Just EQ. It didn't clutter the mix because nothing else was going on, pretty much. Like when the harp and celesta play in the intro, they only play with like Okay, no, it was already full. So I don't know. They don't clutter the mix just because they are not so cluttering. So let me check the span here. What do they look like? See, like it's very small. They are very small compared to everything else that's going on. If I remove them right now, then the track looks like this. So like they took very little space. You could still hear them because everything is like sustained while they are plucked. So they might cut through the mix a bit more. Actually, I added the celesta to help the hard passage stand out more by adding the very high frequencies like this. And yeah, so like when you use sustain elements versus like plucked or short elements, the short elements are going to be more noticeable, which is why the melody here stands out a bit more, and it's a bit more strong because the melody is with marcatos and staccatos, while you know, the chords, some are with sustain, some are with like some with marcatos and sustain. But anyway, below that, one thing I forgot is this. Very important. This is the spiccato that goes on in our climax here, or whatever you want to call it, in the part with the loud choir. And there's a cool thing about this spiccato. So obviously my computer now is going to die because by reading all these notes together while live streaming, it's not going to be able to cope. But check it out. So this is Metropolis Arc 1. And one thing you see is that it does this like, and then here. Like these passages here that I put every so-and-so bars, these variations really help into not making your staccato pattern freaking boring. And the staccato pattern also changes. Like it's like it has a constant motion, like constant pattern in the way it goes up and down. And then after a bit of up and downing, it does a variation. But the other thing is that it changes depending on the chords that I'm triggering, you know, with the rest of the song or the track. Then above of that, we have this first violin, which just enforces the harmony on certain notes and accompanies the melody. Kind of. But yeah, that's one thing I forgot to say about this part. And then also the way it ends is also very interesting. So in the end, after we did the variation, we do the counter melody and everything on the brass and the choir. It does this sort of, instead of doing da 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 da, it's a da 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 da. And wait, sorry, it does this. So again, I didn't end the melody on what it is supposed to end, but I did a variation again. So this is what the technique I found to drag a melody forwards without it sounding boring is every time end it with a variation that doesn't give people what they were expecting. It's an element of like surprising people, but also making people familiarize, but also surprise them in some ways. So that's what I did in this transition, kind of. And now let's see what is happening. This is going to be very weird to explain with the audio without the MIDI. But basically, well, let's start from the actual first feature, which is the melody. So there's one that keeps on going out, which is crazy, and then there's others like da 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 da. So one is very like steady; it keeps on repeating, and I can show you the MIDI now. And this is a cool effect you can trigger. Like if you want to build up tension like this, this is something that is done in trailer music a lot, where you have the final stinger, track goes higher when you're like, whoa, this is amazing, whatever. And usually the stingers is there's an element that repeats over time. So one part of the choir is actually repeating the same stuff. Kind of, it's actually this part, sorry. So that is the part going higher. So in a stinger, you want the part that goes higher in terms of like semitones, because that increases the tension a lot. And I'm not like these notes, they belong to a scale. You can even play a scale, that doesn't matter. Now, the other half is doing this. It changes only in the last notes, but it's just about giving us an element of repetition so that people don't go insane. And I have that going on in the choir. The rest, what it's doing, like the brass. Sorry for the laggy computer. But yeah, so we have, oh, it's lagging because Isotope Ozone is activated, the scoundrel. Anyway, so fuck, it's still, oh, what the hell? It keeps on activating itself. What the hell? So in the brass, we have one bass trombone doing this, which is just the same as our choir almost. Just alternating between like sustain and staccato. Then the French horn is doing something similar. Then the trumpets, actually. These notes, you know, I struggle with them because they sound a bit out of tune or whatever. I just added them to create a bit of more, you know, spicy harmonies, I would guess. Trumpets sound a bit annoying to me, but they will give you like, they are the cutting edge in terms of like the highest timbre brass. So they're very nimble and very like, you know, they're noticeable because like they're super high in terms of tonality and timbre, but they usually do not clash with any other instruments so easily because they have such a high timbre that you can actually use them to actually add the notes that, like if you're doing a diminished chord, obviously one of the voices in the diminished chord might be a bit unpleasant to hear. So you can use that voice, you can put it on trumpets because they are not so hugely aggressive. And I think that's something I learned in Brian Tyler's Tour de Dark World. Like he does some tutti, and on that specific tutti, the trumpets are doing the most edgy notes that don't really fit so well with the chord progression. But since they are on the trumpets, which are so tiny, they are just the top end of the chord progression. They don't clash so much. It's a weird explanation, by the way, but on the trumpets, usually I just create something spicy like that. And then yeah, the women choir, kind of doing the same thing as the rest. The percussion and the strings might be interesting. So in this variation, so well, on one side we have the string staccato going a bit crazy. You can think of this as a riser. You know, I'm just trying to rise with this pattern. So like doing an ostinato, do patterns, guys. Like do something that goes up and down in the same way, but change the notes in that go up and down, okay? So this is what, this pattern stays the same. And then here I have a variation just to close this sentence. And then the coolest part is probably the percussion, which is doing this. So like it's cymbals following the da 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 by hitting on every main part of that note, like a dun dun dun, so something like that. And then this is just, you know, just to have a build up. I added like these tympanic rolls, which with Rhapsody Orchestral Percussion you have these rolls notes that they can use dynamics to make them rise in terms of like you know, intensity. Same thing is happening here with the cymbals, I think. Yeah, this one is being like modulated by this, you know, parameter, so it goes more intense. And then it ends like that. And then I also added the I think they're called wind chimes, these guys, which is are very subtle, and they just lead beautifully in the next part. So like if you check out with the strings. But it's not hearable now, of course, because it's not mastered. But, you know, when you use wind chimes like that, you just build interesting transitions. So, like, when you want to link two parts which are not related, and these two parts are not related, because, like, this is quite, you know, hard hitting with the choir, and it's just epic and huge, while this is, like, no percussion, no nothing. So it's an interesting leap. When you want to do these sort of leaps, and these are the things that make your track stand out or make your track not boring. When you introduce a degree of change that is so big that you really feel like, okay, we changed the space we were in before, you know? Here it feels like we are in a massive fight with, I don't know, Vikings. Kind of, or it feels like very heroic or something, right? Very like battle sort of style, whatever. But here, it feels like we're flying. So like this huge leap has to be done some way, you know, you cannot just do this change and just be cool with it. So that's why I did like I added the wind chimes, and that's like to link the two parts, to have an element that blends like the two parts together. And also that's the reason why I have the hybrid percussion doing this again. You know, the reason why I have the rolls and the timpani and the cymbals, all those things, and also the way I ended the melodies. All of this was built to lead us into this next part well, you know? So now in this next part, I didn't, like, I again wanted to play the main melody again. Like, da, 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 but I thought it would have been too boring to do that again. So that's what I did. That's why in this part I did a bit of a, you know, bridge, and it sounds, you know, like this. So I suppose the main melody in this bit you can think it's this one, like the one violin. Again, solos of the C from performance samples. And evolves to this. I just wrote this as a transitory thing, okay? And I decided to embellish it with the strings ensemble below that. So the strings ensemble below that is actually very interesting. This is why I showed you before, it does independent movements. The cool part about this string ensemble, I think, is this one. Like this da 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 da. It's just so beautiful, right? If I remove it, it's still nice, but no, it doesn't have this motion. Now, the other cool thing about this string ensemble is that so this part is very quiet and very chill, you know? So the toughest thing for me is to write relaxing stuff or stuff that is not aggressive, but stuff that is minimal like this and make it sound still interesting some way. And you have to play with subtle details this time to do things like this, okay? To like play with relaxing elements without making them sound boring. So what I did is I began this part purposefully without any bass. So if you check out the string ensemble, it's doing this, okay? And then here, we have the bass, like da da do, this thing here. And then below that, I also think I have a sub bass from Jaeger. It's sub bass I synthesized myself. Basically, it's just a basic wave-table from Jaeger. It's actually 2 wave-tables. And they accompany the strings. This is something I talked about in a tutorial which I made about emotional chords with strings. So if you have sub bass on your strings, below your strings, on lower notes like this, you will reach certain, you know, frequencies and timbres that normally you wouldn't reach. So that also helps. And then we also, on top of the strings ensemble that I showed you before, we have this violin tremolos. So if you do these sort of things, like when you play a tremolo very quietly with the dynamics, like they're very low right now, like this. They're still moving, by the way, but they're very low. So this, doing like super high notes, but very quiet, helps you, again, into defining the harmonies more. So this is just a way to enforce certain notes without, you know, taking too much space in the track. So the full string ensemble sounded like that. And it evolves as it goes here, I think. Okay, so this is kind of like the counter melody that I placed here. And I actually added this counter melody on different instruments. The women choir are also playing it right now, I think. And also the harps are playing it right now, and the celesta. No, sorry, the women choir are not, so just celesta. So as you saw on one side, on our violins, it's just playing like this. But in the harps and celesta, it's actually playing by doing this sort of like a, arpeggio. It's not like this. We have these notes here. And as you see, these notes here, which, they intermit or they arpeggiate. I don't know what they do. I don't know how to call it. They change, Here it changes. This is because they enforce certain harmonies. And I have this on celesta, I have this on harps. And that's because you wouldn't, when you play a harp or celesta or a guitar, and you have to play such a simple melody, you will get bored if you just play it like this. You prefer to embellish it, right? So that's what I did. I thought, hey, if I was the guitar or the harp player, sorry, or the celesta player, what would I like to do? I would probably like to embellish it like this. So that's what I did. And I thought it was cool. And yeah. And then what else do we have here? Yeah, the main melody on violin, and then the choir. which is just actually layering the main melody from violin. And then we have this going on. Kind of. Okay, so like the solo violin and the choir, both in the same octave, I think, right now. The violin is playing, I cannot even see it right now. The violin is playing, you know, from octave 5 to octave 6, and I think the choir is doing the same exact notes. This choir is from Stormchoir, and I always advocate against like trying to fit too much into a specific octave. You know, sometimes it's good to like actually have a melody playing on one octave range, but also double it on a different octave range. But in this case, I did it on the same because I actually like the way it sounded, and you know, I felt the actual space for the melody to be in the arrangement right now was that octave. Because nothing else was much going on there. Nothing much else was going on there. So I just did women and soloists because like there's a certain lyrical quality to each orchestral instrument. And with lyrical, I mean, how much do they sound like they are being sang rather than played? And you know, because when you sing, there's so many things you can like you can add so many nuances, like just like I did here, a very bad example, but you can do that, and that's what I suppose makes an orchestral an instrument lyrical. Now, with string ensembles, you might not get the same lyrical quality that you get on solo violin. You know, with solo violin, every single nuance in detail in your legatos and all those things is very, very much noticeable. So I think when you layer it with women choir, it just sounds amazing because they're both just lyrical instruments, and that's why I did it like that. Also, I like I wanted to create the sense of like, again, we're flying something. I wanted this to feel like sacred or something like that. So, you know, these beautiful string chords with a solo violin and choir on top of that feels like, I don't know, being in church, whatever. So now, that is a melody that I wrote myself, and it ends on a high note again. Like, you can see this every time. Like, whenever I break, it ends on a higher note. Even here. I think, no, here it doesn't. But usually, whenever I do a transition in this track, it ends on a high note. And I do that exactly because I want to increase the tension before the transition kicks in. Because that's a beautiful way to deliver a transition. Now, after this part, we go even more quiet. And actually, let me show you with the stems. So after this part, this is a bit of the song where I actually got stuck for a few days. We have a violin, a flute, which is playing this. You know, our melody again. But again, I didn't want to finish like da 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 da, the normal thing. Okay, I actually wanted this part to sound ethnic now. I wanted to like experiment and see how many moods I could evoke in a single track. So I added this flute, and then I added the ethnic vocals from Vocalisa. Where are they? These guys. And I thought, okay, I'm gonna go full like ethnic. Let's bring all the guns. And then I noticed, hey, Vocalisa is actually the only ethnic library I have. So I didn't know how to go about this, and I decided to actually go for something else. So sometimes, guys, like I actually tried to write this in a specific way, and it sounded very boring. And I did a few attempts, and I worked a bit on this part, but I ended up scraping all of it because it just didn't sound good with the stuff I had, with my creativity and everything. So I just went for something different, which is what it is now. So sometimes, guys, it's very imperative. And as I decided to like scrap it, delete everything I wrote on this bit, except for the main vocals and the flute, I had the whole idea for completing the track. So sometimes when you get stuck, it's not only about, hey, I need to be creative. I need to, defeat writer's block. Sometimes it's just accepting the idea that whatever is there, whatever you wrote needs to go because it's not good for some reason, okay? So distraction is imperative for creation. I read this quote in a EDM producer interview once, and it stuck with me because it's very real. So if you're stuck with a song, maybe, save it as version 1, and then you create version 2 where you just delete a certain part and you write entirely from scratch and see what comes of it. So what I decided to do was to, here add solo cello. just again, carry it forwards, and to kind of like, you know, the beautiful thing here, which is probably not noticeable, is that the women choir, like, hey, this thing here, ends on the same note as the solo cello, because the solo cello now is like being delegated with the task of carrying the melody which the women choir was supposed to carry. So, you know, this beautiful dialogue, they end, like this ends on the same note as the solo cello begins, as like the solo cello carries that melody forwards. That was one of the thoughts. The other thing I wanted to do is this part to be very silent, because like the rest of the track is quite bombastic. This is a bit relaxing, but still we haven't reached a part where it's like very quiet. So again, I try to be relaxing, but without sounding boring. So what I did is I added this. When seen with MIDI, it's still like an arpeggio, but this arpeggio, you know, you see it changes. It's like, I don't know how to call it. It's not playing melodies, but it's actually changing the notes so frequently that it just has this interesting motion that carries the track forwards. As for the celesta, it's playing the main fourth theme, just like the woodwinds are doing. And then what else is going on here? Let me check, because I kind of forgot. So we have the flute, we have the vocal stem, we have the percussion. No, what happened? Did I compromise my project file somehow? Oh my god. Oh no, I stretched all the tracks. Okay, no. Okay, cool. Are we back to normal? Okay, cool. Okay, sorry about that. Now, I was talking about this part. So in this part, okay, so this is the transition to the next bit, which is nothing like this. So the next bit is this, which has nothing to do with this, even in terms of melodies. So what I did is here I brought back the fullness of the track by bringing back the low end. And I did that with this sort of like that you heard is just a string ensemble playing, I think, tremolos and stuff. So this guy, that thing there, this is what's going on in the string ensemble, and the dynamics are done in such a way that we have that sort of rise. Starts very, you know, small with 2 voices, then 3, and then 5. The second thing we have is the sub bass being triggered on the final part of this. And I think we also have the French horn doing something similar. So this French horn plus sub bass plus strings ensemble, they just, when you check them out on the span, which I'm going to open another span for my actual master without the stems. So when we check them out on a span thing, they look like this, which is super huge compared to when we don't have them at all. So you see like the difference it makes in terms of frequencies. It gives us like openness because it has high end, but also it has low end. And then below that, we have these guys, which are again our timpani friends. And adding timpani is it's not as huge as, I don't know, taiko or epic toms or whatever, which we're gonna see now here. But this sound, the timpani rolls, guys, they are so used in film music because they just feel huge. Especially when you increase their volume. Now they're very tame, but if you increase their volume a lot, they just sound, just because of their timbre, the way the timpani sounds is just amazing and big. So if you add it below your, a passage like this, below like a chord rising, it really helps. And now it doesn't really show because, again, it's not mastered in this case. I cannot use the mastering plugins, but if you download the stems, you're going to see that yourself. And now the cool bit that leads to the next part is this. So in the next part, I have this going on the strings. which is obviously a way for me to like cue in the dreaded Imperial March. So one of the voices is actually doing this, you know, like that thing there is a staple of this part that comes next. So what I did again is before this part kicks in, I gave you a taste of that. So this is the high strings patch from Metropolis Arc 1. Now it's playing, you know, these are just staccatos. It's just they play with such fast rhythm that you get that sort of blurred version of them. And I think I'm also using the spiccato blur, probably. And yeah, the velocities look like this. And I increased their expression, not the modulation. Because with the expression, you just you know, modulate the volume of the sound itself, so they kick in very subtly, but you can still you hear a movement going on in the strings as they end. Right? And then I also have this, which is not that much hearable now, but on the violins, this thing that increases as the next part kicks in. So I think this is a trill. Yeah, this is a half trill on G5. Just you alternate between G5 and G sharp 5, I think. It's like a very fast alternating between those two notes, and that gives me the sound, and it's just very nice. Just like it's like a riser almost. And then I think the main choir is doing something. Yeah, the main choir is doing this sort of like, you know, the rise, the cluster, you know. And I wanted this part to be again manly, so I added these guys. You know, the classic shouts that I add every freaking time because I like them. And yeah, let's check out this final part. This Imperial March part. Wait, it's not playing. Oh, I think I killed my project. This is finally where I finally, it's finally not playing anymore. Okay, I think FL Studio is not able to cope with my orchestral stuff. Yep, seems like I killed it. Anyway, let's just check it out with MIDI. This is what happens when you make tutorials live without recording them. So in this half, in this final part that comes before the actual finale, there's a few things going on. First, well, let's start with the strings again. So as I showed you, we have this that goes on the violins and violas and all those things. So this, and it ends like this, you know, on a high note again. First violins, they're just playing the Imperial March motif, and then the second violins are doing the same thing that viola does, just on a higher octave, and then they lip one octave again, and then they do this variation at the end. Then the basses and cellos, I think. Yeah, just basic stuff. So that with the whole thing, it's gonna sound full because we have the full range again already. But I also added this. So this sounds similar to what we heard now, right? I just added some brass rips to make this whole thing sound even better, but I'm doing the same thing. So we have a cluster, which is just like our trill in our strings, but it's a cluster, and then we have the rips that start on every, you know, freaking part. Then the choir. So the women are just playing the Imperial March theme, and here we have two voices. One that does this. Wait. Oh no, it's not playing in this beat actually. We have this voice. Two voices on one patch from Oceania. So this again is enforcing one melody in the harmony, one note in the harmony, sorry. So it's almost as if they're playing chords together, and this other is going higher and higher. And then it ends with this. And this is a tutti that you're going to see, I think, in most instruments. Like the brass is doing it the same way. The strings are doing similar rhythms. So when you put all three together, hoping my computer doesn't explode. everything is in its right place, you know. They're just cooperating. And then below that, we have some percussion, rolls, and epic toms, and damage. Okay, let's actually see what's going on with this percussive pattern. So this is from damage. We have one layer which is doing, I think, low stuff. Probably. I don't even remember. Let me close this now. So this is doing, yeah. So it does this roll. And then these are the most fundamental parts of my rhythm. And I have them everywhere, but the higher percussive layers are doing something faster than that. I have that happening as well somewhere else, I think, in the epic toms. Yeah. So when you layer the epic toms with damage, each one of these, like, the way in which I pick these layers is, again, timbre. You know, I wanted to have a variety of timbres. Timbres, sorry. Yeah, that's how you say it. I always forget. Timbres. So I wanted to have a variety of timbres. It sounds very bad for when I say it that way, which gave me like a bigger sound, you know. But they're kind of doing the same thing. Then we have some timpani doing like the basic notes. Then we have some cymbals below all of that. And gongs. So guys, gongs are amazing. I used gongs as well as cymbals throughout the track, and I forgot to say that. And then, yeah, that is pretty much what's going on with the percussion. I think below that we have some type of rolls from Hybrid Tools 2. You know, just to, you know. And also one thing I should say is that this part has a different BPM, of course, from this part. Which, so this, like, I don't know where it is, but somewhere in my patterns, there's, yeah, this tempo thing. So this is the BPM of the song. As you can see, it changes. Especially in this final bit I'm going to show you now, we have this. So it lowers gradually. And then here again and again, just to make this more beautiful, more spicy. I don't know how to say it. So after all of that, we have this, again, final part of the melody, which ends on a high note. And you're like, okay, what's gonna happen now? When you do that, you end on a high note like that. You're just triggering an expectation. So again, I did that on most of the track, and every time people expected something to arrive, something to change. Okay, and here I gave them silence for a bit, and then this. So now let's see what's going on in this part, which is the final part. Of course, the thing you might notice, probably, I thought it was noticeable, but maybe it's not, is this. Now here you have the slowdown, you know, da da da. So that I added this to just like carry it a bit forwards, making it sound a bit more human and stuff like that. And this is the main, I suppose, one of the main themes from Star Wars, right? It's not the Force theme, but it's one of the main themes. And I wanted to add it there. At the end, I was like, you know what? I'm through with this like Force theme. I'm gonna add other themes. So here I had like the Imperial March, and here I added the main theme from Star Wars. Now, so that's the only instrument which is carrying the main theme we know so well. We also have this. Then below that, we have some interesting chords and some interesting vocals. So the chords are being played right now by, I think, the strings and the piano, which are doing, and the probably brass, which are doing this. So the piano does that. Very, very quiet, actually. Almost not hearable. And then the string ensemble, which is my favorite part of this part of the song, is again starting simple, 3 voices, then we add another which does this, and another here, and then so this is what it looks like as it plays. So, you know, it's just like branching out, opening up, and then it ends like that. But it has movement because here I added these tremolo voices which rise with the dynamics and everything. So like when you open up your strings in a way where you add the voices like this that go higher, that's already a nice way to make some passages more alive. And then, you know, I did that once again here. And I slowed down the BPM as well. And then below that, we have this going on, which is not very good. This is something I added again to create movement, and I have this going on in the celesta as well after the main Star Wars melody, and in the flute, which starts with the melody F. And then so they're like, you know, moving that way. And yeah, so the woodwinds, the solo vocals from Jaeger are doing the same thing. But then they don't end in doing like da 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 da, but they do this. Kind of. I just thought it sounded cool, pretty much. And then the percussion below, what are they doing? Well, the percussion is the one thing that breaks the silence. So it ends with, like, this part ends with silence, but then you have this sort of roll coming in, very quiet. And then as it ends, you have these tubular bells, which kick in with the timpani. Which I thought were cool. And they get higher. And then we also have a muted French horn, which I forgot about. They do this. So it's almost as if they are accompanying the tubular bells. As it's the same melody. And I wanted to have this because, again, I wanted something to carry the track forward. So, like, it starts with the celeste melody. It also has the vocals that do that high note. And then after the vocals have done the high note, we have the brass when you play them all together. It's all about, just like we saw before with the ethnic vocals, that the cello, like, fade into cellos, into the solo cello. Here, it's like the melodies are hand-holding again. Like, celesta plays the main melody, is being accompanied by the vocals, and as the vocals, both the vocals and the celesta play their last notes, then the French horn will carry through until our, you know, big chord evolution here is over. Everything fades out at the same time, accompanied by a big old timpani roll. So again, all together sounds. So that is how this track was made. It was a bit of a weird explanation because of all the technical problems, which I'm sorry about. But, you know, shit happens, especially when you're live streaming. You know, when I do videos offline, they don't happen. But when I'm live streaming, boy, oh boy. Anyway, guys, if you have questions, this is the right time to ask them. I'm going to do like a very fast Q&A about this track. Don't ask me questions that don't have nothing to do with this track, because there's going to be other occasions for that. But now I'm actually going to go and read back of the chat to see if I missed any questions before. And if you have new ones, let me know now. But yeah, let me read this very fast. Are you using your laptop, the one with 6? Oh, yeah. Okay. What questions do we have here? Let me see. ImageLine Remote. I heard about ImageLine Remote, but I don't use it. What's the size of my monitor? I don't even remember. It's normal. It's like 22, how do you say it? 22 inches, I think. I'm not even sure. What is the RAM memory? 16 gigabyte right now on my laptop. Do you do your modulation and curves with your mouse? I most often do it like that, you know? But sometimes I record it, but very few times. I thought they were playing with the whole orchestra. What? How do you come up with the variation? Just experience, trial and error, or do you imagine it in your head, etc.? I suppose everything of those. You know, it's not, I have a secret method to like, hey, let's do variations. It's just, you know, you notice when you really listen to and analyze other people's music, which is what I do when I write my, my covers. Usually I will have to listen to the original many times over. In this case, I didn't because I wanted to transform it entirely. So when I published the video of this track playing without melodies, people in the comments, many knew it was Star Wars because they saw me live compose the track months before. But I published the same thing on Reddit, and no one on Reddit was able to say, hey, this is actually a Star Wars track when they heard it without melodies. So, my tracks are highly transformative like that. Now, despite when you listen to a lot of like film music and you analyze it, you're gonna notice the way in which they themselves, sometimes in the soundtrack itself, they keep into the main melodies which were introduced by other tracks, but they end them with variations. So the more you notice that, the more you're gonna start to do it yourself. So that's, so you listen to how others do it, and then you are obviously going to absorb that, and you're gonna experiment with that, and then the more you do it, the more you're gonna be able to. So, but one thing is, usually my variations end up on a high note again, and also a cool thing to do during variations is to change the rhythms a bit, So that's what's happening in this variation here, like da 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 da. That rhythm that didn't exist before is new. So if you change the rhythm already, it's like a huge statement. And also, like here, as I told you before, I did that thing where certain things repeat over time, others go higher, and when it becomes unbearable, you just break it. Just end it there, and that's a cool thing to do. But I suppose this is something I practiced a lot when in the years when I composed trailer music. This is a practice in trailer music which is like always done. And in the beginning, it's hard to get it. But after a bit, you're like, okay, now I know how to do it. Okay, I think that's the only question that was in the chat. No, there's other questions. Okay. When you write sustained notes, do you account for the attack time when you click them into the MIDI region before you click them in, or do you adjust by ear afterwards? I adjust them by ear usually. Or actually, I do both. When I wrote this part, for example, and this is something I wrote by with the mouse and keyboard. I didn't record this. I just wrote it by the mouse and keyboard. Actually, there's a video of me showing myself writing this track from scratch, from zero. It's on YouTube somewhere. If you look for Alex Moukala Star Wars, you're going to find it. But basically, what I like to do when I have to write stuff like this is I like to go here on the snap and remove the precision so I can do whatever without sticking to the grid. And you want to do, like, whenever you compose sustained parts, you don't want to stick to the grid, I mean, you have to stick to the grid, like it needs to be measurable and everything, but not perfectly. So I like to do it like this, and then I just write, and I lengthen them a bit differently and start this one a bit before and this or later, whatever. And I write voice by voice. So I might do this, and then I might add another voice on top of that maybe has independent motion. But it's all without the precision in the snap. And I move it around as I compose. Then, if I'm not happy, I will move it around again. While for, like the short articulations, they are stuck to the grid usually, like marcatos and stuff like that. Those are rhythmic, and I need them to be on time, especially when I want to do it on some tutti. Tutti means like all orchestral instruments doing a very specific thing together. I will need them to be on time. So yeah, that's how I do it. Did you put notes in the same octave as chords in this track? For example, long cellos and short violas. How do you change tempo? Put notes in the same octaves as chords. I mean, yeah, I suppose so. Like here, A4, D4, Yeah, sometimes that happens. That is not a bad thing. But as you see, it spaces through. I'm not doing like this. Actually, this is a massive inversion. It's not like all like this, but it's actually spacing out. There's some bass voices, there's some mid voices, and there's some high voices. So it's not that putting we obviously have some, notes in similar octaves. That's not bad. It's not like you need to have one note on each octave, but you want the low end or the low bassline voice to be clear and loud. The mid voices to be like this, usually define the harmony. They need to be like loud, clear as well, and the high voice as well. It's good when you have these three components to your harmonies and a melody soaring on top of that. But it's not a bad idea to have many voices on the same octave. as long as you also bridge out to other octaves. Can you play the complete track? Dopamine. That's beautiful nickname. You're gonna find a complete track in the description of this video. Go check it out there, because my computer cannot cope playing right now while I'm streaming. Could you go a bit further in the description of how you do automation, what you think about when doing automation for strings? Okay, so like, again, I have no process. This is something I actually, it's not easy for me to do this, This is actually the part I hate the most when I compose, doing these motions. But again, let's check out this part, okay? So like this one with the violins and the solo violin here. So wait, no, it's not this one. So what I do is, if I have to write something like this, is of course first I come up with the melody. Second, I come up with how I want it to sound. And again, this goes back to lyrical instruments. You want your instruments, especially the melodic ones, the ones that are in the face of the track, etc., to sound as if they are being sang. If you don't have harmony, if you don't have dynamics, like this melody, if I sang it without dynamics, it would be like da 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 da. But if I sing it with dynamics, like da 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 da. So you see, like rises and falls, and that's how you sing. Lyrically, I suppose. Like that's probably, I'm not sure, but that's what I define as lyrical. When you have these sort of inflections and changes, like legatos and all those things, and this is true for my chords as well. Like, incidentally, this goes on the highest dynamics when I introduce the bass. Something like that. And it just felt okay to me that way. I've wrote it this way. I tried it. And in this part, also, the violin is reaching the highest dynamics. So everything going bright and big is exactly what I wanted to happen here. So that's why I added the bass, I added this for dynamics as well. And here I wanted this. This na 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 to appear and disappear. So that's what I did. Na da 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 da, And it's just, if you struggle with this, just sing while you compose. And as you sing, it's gonna be natural for you to come out with your dynamic inflections and your lyrical, whatever details, and then you can add them to whatever you're writing. Try to really think of your instruments as if they're singers. A singer will never sing like da 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 da. That's screaming. That's not singing. Singing is being gentle and refined and just beautiful and detailed. So your instruments, especially your lyrical ones, need to be that way. So that's how I do it. But it's not easy for me. I spend quite some time on this, but I will usually spend when I compose, I already try to add the dynamics a bit to have laid down the main idea I had for the dynamics and the lyrical passages. But then I don't try to be so hard on it, because when I compose tracks, I want to compose. I don't want to take care of mixing. I don't want to take care of dynamics or the realism. I will just compose and do those things to a minimum extent. And then once I'm not composing the whole idea of the track, or once maybe if I end up in a rut and I'm like, I cannot compose anything new, I will go back and actually revise all these things. And that's the part I hate the most. And the only recommendation is just do it until it sounds good to you. And I'm quite aware that my MIDI control commands, modulations, dynamics, all those things are kind of shitty in my tracks, for the most part, because I really don't like doing that thing. But it's fundamental. And if you don't do it at all, then your track is not going to sound convincing. If you start doing it on every single instrument, or at least on the biggest one, the most noticeable ones, then it's good. Also, as you saw, one thing I should say is that going back to that one example, is that they look kind of curvy. It's not like this, whatever. They're like seamless like this. Okay, so I do this by using the brush function in FL Studio. You trigger the B or you click here, and I remove the snap once again. So that's how I get this very beautiful curvy shapes. But when I am lazy, and that happens, for example, for no, not this, but for the first violin that I showed you before. No, not this. Oh, what was it? Oh yeah, okay. Here, you see here is actually straight lines for this one. Because here it's like, this is so quiet that you're almost not gonna notice it, so it doesn't really make sense to like be super detailed and do like, I'm gonna do it meticulously like this and whatever. No, I'm like, oh, no one is gonna hear this. This is just meant to be a silent detail. I can just modulate it like this, but not without putting too much effort into it. But then as it becomes more noticeable, I go back to being precise. So sometimes it's a good idea to like do this, and you do this by right-clicking and then dragging. Other times you might want to be more precise as something is more noticeable. But you know, people might have a better explanation of that for this stuff than I. So yeah. By the way, I love your chaotic writing process as seen in other videos. Record everything you do from now on. Oh man, I will record as much as possible, but sometimes I just get struck by inspiration without even being prepared. It's just like, I'm just gonna open up a studio for 5 minutes and see what happens. Then boom, you have a massive track. I'm like, oh fuck, I should have recorded that. And other times I record myself and it's just not good. So it's like if you sign in as a Patreon, you will get the MIDI files for the track as well as the stamps. So like these guys, all this stuff. And if you sign on my Patreon page, which you're gonna find down in the description, you're gonna have access to every single one of these stamps for every single track I ever released on YouTube and all the tracks I will publish if you keep on sticking on Patreon. So this is very valuable because it will allow you to analyze the track on your own, and you also get the MIDI after a certain pledge, amount. But yeah, guys, so this, I don't see any other questions popping up. I think this session can be ended. As for the mixing and mastering, that's something you didn't hear or see because my computer cannot handle it. But what I did is I actually, this track, the mixing and mastering kind of like destroyed me because my mixing process was the same as usual. And I made videos about this, so I'm not going to repeat it. Again, as you see, there's almost no panning at all in almost every instrument. The solo instruments are being panned because it's a bit of a different subject there. But basically what I did, I just did volume balancing. So you see the faders, they're kind of moving around. And then some EQing, I suppose. I don't even remember because I don't really take care about these things so freaking much. But in some cases, like I think the solos of the C. So solos of the C is one of the libraries I used in this track the most. The solo violin was a solo of the C from performance samples. And this library itself is like, it's very dry and very quiet. And it gives you the freedom to make it whatever you want it to make. So I just compressed the hell out of it. I did a sound equalizer, I did a reverb on top of that. And also I did a bit of a heavy EQing to shape it. So this is one mixing thing I did. I also have that, I think, in the cello. Removed a bit of the, mid-range of the cello. And for Oceania, there was a part, like a few voices, which I compressed to make them sound a bit more noticeable, like the vocals here in this part. These guys. So half of them is going to this, and the other half, the men are going here, and here they're being heavily compressed because I wanted them to stand out more. Another thing I did in terms of mixing is, as you see here, there's some slight variations here, like volume being increased and decreased very subtly in certain instruments. Then also I did the automation on the tempo, and I did it by clicking here, right click, doing edit events in piano roll. That will open the tempo in your patterns, and then I just did it this way, and I just did it to taste, honestly. Which it's not something you need to do. I just did it because, well, of course, in this bit the track goes faster, and again, I wanted to not bore the listener. So changing tempo is a good idea. Like if you wrote the whole song in 70 BPM, that's good. But if you switch to 195, then it opens up whole new worlds for you. So if you feel stuck, like I did here, maybe consider changing tempo. Not a bad idea. Or you can change time signature. Not a bad idea either. And then for the mastering itself, other than that, on the master, I have this EQ that removes a bit of the mid-range, ever so slightly. You want to be very gentle with your, plugins on the master, because if you just alter the track too much, it's going to sound weird. I also have a bit of OTT, 5% OTT, which is also having a 8% reduction of the mid-range, very subtle again. Then I have a fruity balance, which is being automated. So as you see, this is the volume, like the filter valence on my master. And in certain parts of the song, like this part was very quiet originally. I increased the volume of it a lot. Then it decreases here. That as the bigger it becomes, the lower I lower the volume. You know, just because I wanted the quiet parts to be louder without having to overcompress my track. So I did that with the filter balance. As you see, then it changes like that. And then I also have Isotope on 8, the godsend, although it's what was responsible for this track to not be playable live here. This is a mastering suite, which I use all the time. I made a video about it, so I'm not going to talk about it again at length, but I have an equalizer, EQ, compressor, imager, dynamic EQ, maximizer, which is mostly responsible for the loudness of the track. If I remove it, it's very quiet. And a filter limiter after that. And I just tweak around with it until I was happy with it. And that's pretty much it. That's how I did the master. That's it. Really. Like also here with the flute, I applied a trick from my friend friend Joël Dolly, or Lion's Art Production, where again, as I told in previous videos, I don't like to use panning anymore because it just destroys the balance in your track. So if I want some elements to be actually on the right, like I did with this flute, I'm not sure if I want it on the right or the left. It's on the right now. So I wanted to pan this flute because on the left I didn't like it, but I didn't want to use panning. So one cool thing to do, if you want to use panning while still maintaining a certain balance in terms of like room positioning and all those things, you can use this. You reverse polarity, which swaps the left and right channel of a certain mixer unit, and that just transfers everything that is on the left to the right and vice versa without messing up with your panning or messing up with your mic positions, as I explained in the video where I explain about panning. But yeah, so that is it. And yeah, that's again, guys, if you want to get the stems of this track, it's there on Patreon. I highly appreciate and thank the people who support me there, because that's one of the reasons why I'm able to do these videos at all. Without that, I wouldn't be able to make tutorials like I do. So if you really want to see more stuff from me, check out the Patreon. You get rewarded for that. And yeah, that's it for this video, guys. Sorry for the technical problems in the beginning. We didn't sort it out very well, but whatever. we made it to the end of this one. And yeah, I'm gonna see you guys. Yeah, this week, I think Friday, I'm gonna release another tutorial. But for now, that's it. Thank you for joining, and thank you for watching. Subscribe, and bye bye.